Shadowlands expansion pre-patch can't be further than a couple of months away, so I would say that the time is getting short to regroup and collect your thoughts and take your picks on what class and what spec you will be maining in the next expansion. In this video I'd like to share my thoughts on what my choices are, what's my train of thought is like, what is my thinking like when choosing these mains for myself. It's not gonna be one, spoiler alert, it's gonna be a couple of the ones that are gonna go first, but let me take you through my thinking and hopefully you'll find it inspiring and entertaining. Let's do this! Hello and welcome back to the channel, everyone. Time for us to have an honest chat about the pros and cons that my top class and spec choices would offer us should you and I pick those to be the first ones to the top in Shadowlands expansion. I am rarely going the traditional way that some altoholics choose typically. They know that eventually they'll get all of their alts up there. So they simply start by picking the easiest one that will get there quicker to start earning the currency, any other bind on account gear, achievements like Pathfinder and so on. A lot of people therefore choose something like Beastmaster Hunter, the spec that's famous for its soloing abilities and independence from social environments. I've done that in the past and have nothing bad to say about the Beastmaster as a spec of choice, but I do find it a little bit boring. Plus, I am not really a DPS first and foremost. I'm more of a tank. So my choice would come down to if this particular class at the very least offers me a potential role of a tank in the new dungeons. While I'm a true soloer and group content has always been a second choice for me, I see new dungeons in any expansions as attractive pieces of content that I'd want to try sooner rather than later. So I will be lining up my Demon Hunter, Death Knight, Druid and Paladin as real, let's call them contenders for my personal and casually paced race to the top level when Shadowlands launches. Before we'll zoom in on these four, let me very quickly tell you that I'm not counting the Monk as a contender here, because while I enjoy Windwalker DPS spec to some extent, I find Brewmaster way too polluted by buttons and abilities that bloat the class and make it less exciting to play, in my opinion, compared to others. So what about Warrior then, you will ask me? Same thing, my friend, really. I've mentioned in my video about Protection spec that you can find on my channel if you have not watched it already, that the spec, in my opinion, once again, lacks self-sustain, aka self-heal, that would make me feel confident in my soloing adventures without a group or a healer attached to me. And generally the spec also has too many buttons to push to be properly enjoyable tanking option for me personally. In case it makes any difference for you altogether though, I would still rate Warrior higher than a Monk. So when eventually time comes to blow the dust off those second choice classes, the Warrior will go before Monk for me. Okay, so let's go to my top 4 now, let's zoom in on those. Demon Hunter would have been a very easy choice for me always, as they are arguably the best casual friendly soloists in the game right now before Shadowlands launches, coming with a bunch of solid pros for a player like me. They can glide, which once again one could argue is poor man's substitute for flying in a non-flying world until Pathfinder kicks in, but as we know, Blizzard will have to wait for that to happen for quite a while, won't we? They don't have too many buttons in either DPS or tank specs, which works fantastically well for me. They are the most mobile class in the game, with the only competitor being a well-played, twitchy finger Windwalker Monk, but I've mentioned already my issues with this class already. They have a self-heal basically built into their natural damaging rotation cycle of abilities that they use, which is fantastic. and could win the spot number 1 in my eyes every time if we just allowed ourselves to pause here and think about it for a few extra moments rather than move along. So just not to cut this hopefully informative video short here and bail out with a very easy class choice on my hands already, I'll tell you the cons that I see for Demon Hunters. It is the endgame viability for them as tanks. Yes, they're still very enjoyable and all that, but they are very much reliant on active mitigation, twitchy finger potential, not feeling chilled, but always hopping around, and naturally they are feeling like a very squishy tank when content becomes remotely challenging. And what I'm going to do in Shadowlands endgame, you will ask me? Well, if you're my regular, you'd know it already. I am aiming to run Torghast solo, similar to how I did Horrific Visions, and that's what I'm encouraging you to subscribe for, show your support and kind of let the channel grow, help me remain motivated for this. That's a little bit of a sidestep here in this little narrative. And I will be also tanking LFR probably in dungeons. That's all I can tell you right now. So this is where I'm starting to look in the direction of the other 3 contender classes. We'll probably go a little quicker through these, as the scene setting for Demon Hunter included extra information that would now serve as a background and kind of explanation of my choices and the pros and cons that I will be pointing out for the remaining 3 classes. So, Death Knights. Pros include the theme of the expansion, where Death Knights fit right in and will feel most at home, if you know what I mean. I'm not a lore nerd, and this choice won't make it or break it for me. I'm more of a gameplay guy, but I have to consider this element to make sure that I enjoy the game and expansion to the fullest, and as it was intended to be played, so to speak, as it was put together by the devs. See, I think that basically Death Knights were a central class in their design for Shadowlands, not an afterthought. I bet that they've designed Shadowlands around Death Knights. Bolvar losing the helm to Sylvanas and all the other classes just then somehow falling as their friends, helping their friends get the helm pieces back together and make the use of them. I know I'm exaggerating right now, plus I'm not in beta, I did not go through the story, please take it all with a grain of salt. The other obvious pros making me consider Death Knight at this stage as a main would be the very strong self-healing and self-shielding capability and virtual unkillability, if there is such a word, of the class, of most of the specs. The option to switch between solid tanking and 2 very differently feeling DPS options is also very attractive. One of those DPS options, as you know, Unholy spec, even gives me a pet, and I love opportunity to play with the pet while still remaining a tank. Think about it, how often does that come around, like an opportunity like that? Additionally, Death Knights have a covenant or a class ability, I'm not quite sure which one it is, in Shadowlands, that allows you to have an extra appendage arm, believe it or not, that is apparently dragging enemies around and trivializing some of the content, making the other content quite hilarious. According to Preach Gaming, I watched a few streams of his and a few videos of his from Alpha and Beta, which looks very fun, and I'm all about fun. So, by the way, speaking of fun and abilities, I can't right off top of my head right now remember any other ability of other class that I'd feel similarly about, and I would be like, oh, I can't wait to try that out. Cons, there are cons, include some of the old well-known DK issues. They are generally very slow, that's their biggest problem. They can't glide like Demon Hunters, but that's needless to say. They can't heal either, while Paladins, for example, and Druids offer that option if I, as a player, was completely bored at one point. Which probably should be considered too if we are trying to compare the classes and the choices, but frankly, that particular benefit isn't very high on my list right now, choosing a spec for Shadowlands and a class for Shadowlands. Final con for DK and Demon Hunters as well is that both classes, as I already said, heavily rely on active damage mitigation when tanking. In other words, put simply, if you don't push a button, you might be dead. DK is more solid than DH, of course, in that respect, but they still feel that way. They're still active mitigators. You need to be good at it. And I am, I don't know, medium. Paladins, let's talk about Paladins. Pros, well, Paladins are quite mobile. They have certainly plenty of self-healing and can do all of the 3 roles in the game, available in the game: healer, DPS, tank, which generally gives some extra degree of freedom to me as a player to choose what I want to do. Another pro is that Protection Paladin currently, as you know, especially if you have been patronaging is certainly not a word for sure, my channel for a while, you would know that Paladin is my tank of choice in BFA, simply because of how they feel, how their tanking abilities work. Plus, Preach in his Torghast explorations reported very recently, at the moment of recording of this video, that protection is very fun spec, particularly in Torghast. So I cannot ignore that feedback, and I have to take that very seriously into consideration, because I know that Torghast is going to be a central part of my gameplay, and I know that I'll have fun regardless of whatever I pick, but this is certainly sounding very tempting right now. Cons for Paladins are not many, to be fair, and could probably come down to 2 general points for me. They output very low damage in protection spec, especially against single targets, compared to the other 3 classes. And they also feel very squishy, to me personally, as retribution in the DPS spec, when soloing any, again, remotely challenging content, elites and so on, or running Horrific Visions solo. Finally, let's talk about our final contender, Druids. The pros are honestly too many to list here. Huge choice of roles I can play, huge variety of gameplay options, how I can approach DPS, how I can approach, well, healing and tanking are a bit more straightforward, but at least DPS parts are definitely very different. I can play differently while staying within the same class. And also passive mitigation, so they offer the best, the most well-known passive bear, thick fur, bum, fat mitigation that I love, while also being relatively high on the damage dishing numbers in the tanking spec, thanks to the stacks of thrash effect, where they lacerate everything and they make everything bleed around them. I love these days, when I record this video, I love spending time on my Guardian spec Druid when I run Horrific Visions. Druids can obviously shift in and out of forms to heal themselves or perform utility actions such as battle res on the group members if necessary. Their travel forms are instant and allow them to pick up herbs or complete quest objectives while, flying around and without having to dismount. This is a huge cheat, huge. Speaking of cheats, they can even stealth in any spec. They can just shift into a cat and stealth past enemies to make their lives much easier, completing different objectives, content like Horrific Visions and so on. I could continue this list, as you have probably already gauged, but I will stop here, more in the interests of saving you the time. Cons for Druids are really not many, to be honest with you. Main one that actually I don't just have to work hard to come up with it, it really makes a big difference for me as a player, is that while some of their forms, animal forms, are interesting, especially if you're playing something like a Zandalari Troll Druid, the Boomkin form of Dino Bird is very interesting, but they conceal your otherwise potentially awesome new armor or any other cosmetic appearance elements. You will always look like a bear, basically, which can be boring. Legion, of course, has thrown in a few options for us that were fantastic, that were offering us very variety of options in terms of how the bear particularly could look. And the biggest one, obviously, is something that I still regret that I missed out on, and it is the werebear form that one could get from Mage Tower. What was I thinking back then? I don't know. I regret it every day when I play Guardian Druid. I want to tell you that, guys, once again. So this actually counts a lot for a casual player who needs a bit of variety, and variety, even visual variety, even how we see ourselves in the game, to remain engaged. So to me this is actually a very big point, a very big con. So let's summarize. We have one easy choice, or at least it looks easy. Demon Hunter, who I will be playing anyway. So Demon Hunters will be in my top 3. We also have a very fitting Death Knight, DK, who sounds like a lot of fun of gameplay, you know, and gameplay which I like a lot of fun in Shadowlands, all these appendages, the fantasy that fits really, really well. It just seems like the class that they built the expansion around. Then we have obviously a Druid cheater class, yes, that's just too good at everything to give it a pass. Just too good, okay? And we have a Paladin who is fun and very enjoyable to tank currently in BFA, and that's the only thing I enjoy doing on a Paladin in BFA, let's be very, very clear. But that alone tells me that Paladin doesn't shine enough for me in any other aspect that I can gauge right now. So the final countdown for me begins with Paladin dropping out of the top 3 and taking spot number 4. Spot number 3. I will be awarding, after some consideration, to Demon Hunter, who is too squishy in endgame tanking and too unforgiving for my mistakes that will surely happen to be the main tank for me. And that's inevitably what I will be doing in the endgame, even in a non-competitive environment. It also offers only one type of DPS gameplay, as opposed to the remaining 2 contender classes. Spot number 2 goes to the Druid, losing by a tiny margin in my book, purely because we haven't heard anything new about new forms, new Druid forms, or substantial cosmetic changes to a Druid form, like Werebear was from Mage Tower in Legion. If they told us that they will be giving us something like that as a little remote even carrot on a remote stick somewhere in the middle of Torghast level 355, it would have been a no-brainer pick for me. It wouldn't have been a contest. I would have picked it immediately. The top spot goes to the Death Knights. Death Knights, congratulations winning this little race, little virtual race to the top of Gyro's list. DKs were my favorites before Demon Hunters came out and muddied the waters, so to speak. DKs offer 2 wonderfully enjoyable DPS specs and 1 fantastic tanking spec with active mitigation. Yes, it's not great, maybe, not as great as the lazy Druid would, but they are still awesome overall, which is why my DK will be the first and main toon I will level up in Shadowlands. So what about you, my friends? Did any of this logic resonate with you? Are my choices among your top 3 even? What do you think you will be maining in Shadowlands based on simply your desires, simply about you knowing who you are, what you like in the game, what you enjoy the most? I think that this type of kind of logical trimming down of your list and thinking pros and cons and thinking it's sort of, well, it's a fun exercise to go through, to be honest with you, just by yourself. For me, it was certainly fun to summarize in this little narrative and share with you guys. But I'd love to hear from my people. What do you think? What are your classes of choice? Maybe you always had one main and you're gonna stick to it. Good on you. Maybe you are an altoholic like me and you have multiples and you need to decide at some point which one will go first. So what's gonna be your choice? Maybe I'm missing something. Let me know in the comments down below. Let's have a chat. I really love reconnecting with you guys, love talking to you about this kind of stuff. Shadowlands is around the corner, and even though I'm not in beta still, I'm happy to talk to you about these topics and speculate if I have to, or rely on other people like Preach Gaming to tell me what's up, and then we can discuss that ourselves. Thanks very much for tuning in today. I will be talking to you once again in 2 days maximum. As you know, some of the videos are coming out even sooner, even shorter time frame. Talk to you soon. Bye.